Welcome, one and all, to Liberty After Dark live stream. We hope that you enjoy the show and will engage in the conversation along with us. So, without further ado, here's your host, Christian Moore.
All right, well, how about we do that and we figure out why this camera is deciding to not connect because it was just working. Well, now my balances are all thrown off, but that's fine. I can fix that. It's just part of the game, I suppose. Always got to go behind myself. Looks like the glitching is back. See, that's weird. I've been having issues with this camera. I may have to get a new one pretty soon. It has been see, every once in a while I get those glitches. It's weird. Don't understand why, but it seems to be happening a lot more than usual lately. So we shall see. Hold on, let me get these comments going. I'll be smaller later on, so it won't be as distracting. Wow, that's really bad. I'm gonna have to actually try something real quick. It was not nearly that bad when I was testing. Whoops. I'm going to set up the chat and then we'll get the wonderful Patrick Smith on here. And then we will press and we'll have a good conversation. Should be lots of fun. Putting the kids to bed. BRB. Strider's here. Invite your friends, guys. It'll be a good one. Like I said, I've come to terms with the fact that I'm going to keep talking, but I'm going to mess with this camera. I have come to terms with the fact that most of the people watch or who consume my content do so in the podcast. And as much as I would like for everybody to just, love the live stream, that's not exactly very realistic because a lot of people just don't have the time for live streaming. And I don't know why this isn't connecting. Refresh. Yeah, this camera's been causing me quite a bit of issues recently. We'll see if that works. Maybe it'll be a little bit better. Gotta redo the settings one more time. It worked fine last episode. Nah, it's still doing it. Whatever. We'll press. Like I said. This is more of a... Did it freeze up my camera? Really? Wow. You've got to be kidding me. This is not the kind of issue I needed right now. Oh, man. Worked fine for like a 3-hour show. No issues. The second I want it to do some things. The one stream you can drink without talking. All right. Screw it. We'll do it here. We'll do it on this part. Wow, that's vibrant. I don't quite need that much. Whoops. That's way too much. This is a very sensitive little dial here. I don't think I'm qualified to be messing with some of these knobs, but we're doing it anyways because it makes me look less like a dead zombie man. So it's still doing focusing though, isn't it? I'll try it one more time. The Logitech settings. It's still trying to focus in on me and blurring, and if it kills the camera again, we will. All right, cool. Sweet. Let's see if he's ready to go. I don't really have any. I mean, the biggest. Well, we can talk about a little bit of news once I send this message. All right. So, like I was saying, there is a the one big piece of news is really the debates, which I'm assuming most of you who were here watched the debates. But the wonderful Patrick Smith is ready, so we are going to go ahead and give him a call real quick. You guys hear everything fine on the audio? Cool. We're going to start video call. Hey, how's it going? Here, let me do one thing real quick. Change this, make sure they can all hear you.
Oh, you already live on your end. You don't test or anything. You just like raw dog it, right?
No, we're going straight in. We're going straight in today. I did a little bit of stuff beforehand. I wish I had done more, honestly, but I had some issues with my camera. The second I hit live, it all looked fine. And then, of course, the instant I choose to go live, my camera decides that it's no longer wants to cooperate. So figures, but hey, that's where we are. You mind doing me a favor, just saying a couple words real quick, just making sure all the audio sounds good.
Taxation is theft and extortion.
There we go.
You should be ashamed.
Good. We're gonna have plenty of time to talk about that, all sorts of awesome stuff like that. So, just to give a little bit of an introduction, while I'm setting your wonderful face up here, so people can see that amazing beard. His volume's low. Okay, I can fix that. There we go. Yeah, see, this is why I want to do that stuff real quick.
There you go.
Yep. And so just to let you know, I mean, this is the live stream. All these guys that are here come for the live stream. They know how it goes. I will be releasing this as a podcast, and we'll edit out the part where I'm putting your face in and stuff like that. But
All right.
so that's where the majority of the people who listen to the show come through. But like I said, we do this for the people who enjoy them. So it's fun. I like it. I enjoy the live streaming.
I did another podcast a while back, Liberty Late Night. There's a lot of liberty happening after. Like, can we get some liberty during the day, please? Somebody.
Yeah.
It's like Liberty Late Night, Liberty Dark After Time, Sleepy, whatever.
Yeah, nope. It's only at night. Okay, we can't come out during the day. We're all nocturnal creatures. So
That's when the liberty comes out.
exactly. Yeah. So, first things first, before we even start getting into it, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well.
Fantastic to hear that. Good. It is going great over here, especially now that I've got my life figured out and we have your awesome face on the stream. I think your audio still might be a little low. I'm just going to make sure with my chat real quick. I did amp you up on my side, so I wouldn't change anything yet. But
All right.
we can work with that regardless. We will make it work. No. Okay.
If you need me to crank it up, I might be able to do that on this end.
Just a hair would be nice.
I'm already almost peaking over here.
Oh, you are? Yeah, it's
Turn it up anymore, you're gonna peak.
Yeah, it's probably just I'm getting about minus 20 from Discord. So,
Oh, Discord.
yeah, I'm just messing around real quick, seeing if I can fix it, and then we'll get in. If not, I can always fix it in post, and it shouldn't be that bad. I'll turn myself down a little bit if I have to equalize it, if you know what I'm saying. One more thing I can do is change this to that. All right, cool. That's gonna be what we do. That right there should be perfect. So, welcome to Liberty After Dark. This is the wonderful Patrick Smith. I've watched a bunch of your stuff in the past. I saw you on Liberty Late Night. It's great. Very eloquently spoken anarchist. Runs Disenthrall, which is probably what you're most well known for outside of your business, I'm assuming. And lots of great content there. If none of you guys have seen it before, make sure to check him out on Facebook as well, over at Disenthrall and Not Governor Patrick Smith. You want to go ahead and say some opening words about yourself? Anything you want to share?
I am a capitalist first and foremost. I entrepreneur in the technology space, automotive, power sports, marine, RV, cryptocurrency, privacy. Kind of all over the place. That's kind of my love is developing new products, bringing them to market, competing, and making money. That's awesome. My second love is parenting and philosophy and activism. I guess that's three, but it's kind of all the same thing in a way. So I do. I try and bring philosophy to as many new minds as I possibly can. I try and do street activism when I see that will be beneficial. I'm sure we can get into all that. And we did the Libertarian Party, not governor of Texas, run about a year ago now. So it depends on. I just kind of spread myself around like a slut, and so what you know me from might differ wildly. So
Hey, there's nothing wrong with diversifying, right? It's like finances. Helps get exposure out there, helps everybody see you, what's going on. So that's cool.
Keeps it interesting. Yeah.
Yep. So I know that you are definitely a part of this activism. And so today I came with you with the idea that I would like to talk about things that we can do in our individual lives to promote liberty, right? So we get these big, grand ideas all the time. I'm sure you see them. I'm sure you get the questions. Everybody likes to think about, well, how do we completely change the U.S. government overnight so that we're in capitalist utopia tomorrow? Everybody is in a voluntary society, which is not a noble or not by any means a bad goal, I would say. If it was more realistic, I'd say we should be shooting for that primarily. But I do like, and I think it's healthy for people to take a step back and look at what they can do in their own lives to promote liberty, what they can do day to day to help themselves come up with ways to promote and not even so much promote, but just to live the lifestyle they want to live. And I know that you have your own ideas on this. I've seen you talk about them before, and I felt like it would just be great to have you on here to discuss that. And we will also talk about some activism things that do involve larger scale politics, but really I have one question that I want to start this whole thing off with, and this can be a bit of a divisive issue amongst even ANCAPs as their own niche. What is your opinion?
I like those.
Oh yeah, what's your opinion specifically on the implementation of agorism as a form of monetary exchange with the goal of minimizing government interaction?
I do have opinions on this, but
Good.
they're sectioned off into certain types of agorists because there's a lot of different types. They're kind of independent thinkers. So there are the type of agorists that just want to live their life as peaceably and with as least government interference as possible. And so they structure their life to, where possible, go out of their way to conduct their transactions with other people, in the black market, or off the table, let's say. So like, and that could be something as simple as like, you need your air conditioner replaced in your house, and so when the guy's there giving you an estimate, you'd be like, okay, I understand that's your price, but what's the cash price? What's that? Just kind of asking that question. Hey, I don't want you to have to pay taxes on this transaction. Can we cut a deal for a cash price? Just little things like that every day of your life can go a long way towards agorism. On the other end of the spectrum, and maybe you can focus me in on where you want me to go with this, because it's a huge spectrum, but on the opposite extreme, there's agorists that will look you straight in the eye and like tell you that, if you pay taxes, you are somehow culpable for the crimes of the people in government, because your tax money is being used to murder people in other countries. So I have big foundational issues with those types of agorists. I would call that like tax victim blaming, something along those lines. So if you want to focus me, or where do you want to go with that?
Well, I just was going to say those people need to read a little bit more Spooner. I think that would help them out a lot. But when I say the term agorist, I use typically agorism, the idea, the philosophy of agorism. I use pretty much the textbook definition of it, which is the minimization of the state through voluntary transactions, and promoting a free market. I think those people that you referred to at the end are definitely are reading something that I'm not, at least, or are adding personal beliefs into the philosophy, which, every philosophy can be tailored to your specific outlook depending on how far you're willing to go with it, I suppose. But really what I'm focusing on is the primary framework of it. But either way, it just because of that negative connotation, including people who are like left-wing agorists as well, we didn't even bring them up, but that whole, those groups, those communities can sometimes give agorism a bad label. And I like to try to step back and say, look, we can't necessarily allow the whole idea to be hijacked just by a couple minority fringes. So that's kind of where I'm looking at this from, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, from my perspective, agorism is like it's very simple and it's not complicated. It's just literally take the steps that you can to avoid being taxed and controlled and regulated and in your day-to-day transactions. That's it. In your day-to-day associations with people, do what you can to avoid those things, avoid coercion from government and control from government and licensing and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's it. Now, there's people that take it too far to say, well, you have to make every transaction exclude government. Obviously, that's not possible, but it would be. It's also to re-victimize yourself a second time. Like, the first victimization is when the government taxes you and forces you to behave in a certain way to conduct business with other people. The second way that you're victimized is you victimizing yourself by going and living on a floating raft in the middle of the ocean to avoid any interaction with the government at all. Like, you're just extra hurting yourself in that way. You're removing your own liberty at that point. Just to it's like cutting off your nose to spite your face. So I think there's a balance in there, and the balance is really just like, live your life in a way that makes you happy. And it's really like a don't be afraid. Like, agorism to me is like be less afraid to look for the gray market solutions. Like, be less afraid to ask for the cash price, to when I need a water heater right now, and I go to Lowe's and I'm like, hey, that water heater says it's $700. How much will it cost to have somebody install it? And they're like, well, it's $200 plus $100 for the permit and to get a licensed person to inspect it or something like that. It's an extra $50. So I'm like, okay, well, how can I just get a guy to come install it? And nope, we don't do that. It's like just taking that extra step. Like, now, so I left, and now I'm gonna spend a little time looking for somebody that might not care so much about having a license, permit, blah, 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 to install a hot water heater. It's just little stuff like that. That's all it is, in my opinion.
That's a really good example. I was trying to explain the concept to my father, who's a constitutionalist, and he's pretty stuck in his conservative ways. But I was explaining concepts that I am trying to implement in my life and that I talk about on my show and stuff like that. And he was like, well, this whole agorism thing, he's like, you'll never use it. And I was like, you remember that time we went to Home Depot, picked some guys up in our truck, and they helped build the fence for us? He was like, well, yeah. And I was like, sounds a little bit like agorism to me.
That's it. Ta-da! That's it. It's like the opposite of permission culture. You just kind of get things done.
Yep.
That's it.
As long as all parties agree.
Yeah. Yep.
That's good stuff. And, this is one of the places, too, where I think a lot of times, it's good that you give examples like this, because I've heard many different people say, like, yes, agorism is great. We should all do it, without really giving any idea how. So it's really, I appreciate the fact that you kind of went out to say, like, don't overthink this, guys. This is not some kind of national economic model that we're talking about here. This is interactions between people. You could use this every day if you wanted to. If you wanted to.
Another example just from today, because people don't think about this stuff, and you have to kind of retrain your brain to look for these opportunities. Today, I got the hair did, and when they were done, we walked up to the cash register, and she swipes my credit card and hands me the receipt, and it's got the spot for the tip. And I'm like, hey, do you have a Venmo where I can tip you? Because I don't want you to pay taxes on this. And she's like, oh yeah, sure, here it is. Boom, I tip her on Venmo. Done.
Look at that.
Just little stuff like that. It's easy. And, of course, in the notes for the Venmo transaction, I'm like, taxation is theft, Google voluntarism, just little stuff like that. It's easy. It takes like 10 extra seconds, they don't pay taxes, and you expose them, like their brain never thinks about not being above board, and you just expose their mind just for a brief moment to like, oh, this guy doesn't want me paying taxes. Wait a second. Should I not have to pay taxes? That's all it takes. You just live your life in a principled manner, and people will wake up around you slowly. Yeah.
Yeah, see, I've never done the Venmo thing. That's cool. That's a cool idea, though. But I have gotten to the point to where I only tip in cash. I say, "This is your money. You understand that, right?" Yeah, gotcha. So, if they want to put that in whatever system that they have, that's up to them. But, I told them to put it in the back pocket. So,
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, the specific example was unimportant. Like, the owner of the place will watch them, and if I hand her cash, then they'll demand that they record that. But if I Venmo them later, it's less visible.
yeah,
So, that's all.
I gotcha.
That was just an example. Yeah.
Still. Okay, they're still asking me for me to turn up your audio a little bit. I got one more trick up my book.
All right.
And we'll try this.
Crank her up.
All right, go ahead and speak for me real quick.
Mic check 1 2.
All right.
Mic check. Check.
Should be about 5 seconds in the chat before anybody hears it. No, you're fine. I want to make sure you guys can hear this stuff. We do this for you. I want him here so that you guys can hear him. Otherwise, I would just talk about all this stuff. Okay, they said it's looking better now. Cool. Sweet. So we were talking about agorism, implementing that in our own lives. What do you think? So we have this idea now that about volunteering, right? You hear this all the time inside of libertarianism. Get out, volunteer, time, money, whatever you've got, donate, all these things. But you see a lot of people who are maybe not apprehensive, but maybe just apathetic to actually doing so. And I get it. We all live busy lives. We all have our own priorities. Not everybody can volunteer every weekend. Not everybody can give up their whole paycheck to donate to people. But something I've been trying to do more specifically, because I have noticed that I've been probably a little more clammy than I should have with some of my money recently, is within the last month or so, is I've been trying to focus on looking at these ideas as something that isn't, if I truly believe in them, then they aren't really questions of if, but when, in my opinion. And so what do you think about the idea of seeing volunteering and contributing to your communities and donating and doing these things as more of an ethical obligation to your community than a nice frill of the idea?
I wouldn't call charity an obligation.
Sure. Yeah, that's probably a bad word for it, honestly. I think you're right there, but
I'm sorry. When you train yourself in philosophy, you get very annoyingly precise with words. So
no, that's
I apologize.
Fair. That's fair. That was definitely not the right word to use there, but please continue.
So, like, what's your question? I mean, yes, I agree with your premise that, especially as we get more and more, a higher percentage of our income stolen from us in taxes, we have less free time as a result to do charitable stuff. We have less resources to donate to charities as well. So I understand that it's difficult and it's not for everybody, and that's fine. It's okay. There's not pressure to go out and do this stuff. At least I would never pressure somebody.
I would say instead of the word, I would say imperative, maybe an ethical imperative that we show that these things are possible, especially as people like us and everybody in this chat room who are very big believers in expanding the idea and the principles of the philosophies that we are a part of. I just wonder if, and this is more thinking out loud than anything, if we do have some kind of ethical imperative, if not necessarily a requirement, to be a part of these things and to put them more to the front of our mind than perhaps we do at the moment.
I think a lot of the objectivist thought on happiness is right on. Like, happiness comes from living virtuously. And so when you do charity for the purposes of living your virtues, happiness does come from that. So when I do force time into my schedule to go help people because I want to, I don't want to just speak my virtues on YouTube. I want to go out and put them into action. I want to turn the wheels and put them into motion for multiple reasons. One, like if you never try this stuff in real life, how do you know it works? How do you know it's valid? So that's a big part of it. Also, a big part of virtue is that, and this is a throwback to old school Molyneux from years ago, but I think he was right on back in the day when he said that your capacity for virtue is limited or equal to the amount of adversity you face in living your virtues. So, for instance, if you said slavery is wrong and you set about your activism of freeing the slaves today, how virtuous is that going to be? Slavery isn't a thing. Everybody already agrees with you that slavery is wrong and evil and you shouldn't do that. And so proclaiming that slavery is wrong today, how much virtue is there in that? Well, probably not nearly as much virtue as there would have been, hundreds of years ago to stand up and say slavery is wrong, this is immoral, this is evil, free the slaves today. Well, not only would that have probably been a dangerous thing to say publicly in some places, but that danger, that adversity makes room for the virtue. And so doing the hard stuff that is virtuous is where real, thick levels of happiness flow from. I don't know if that was even on the topic you were wanting to talk about. But
no, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, we're pretty much in the same area. I mean, that definitely hits to what I was saying. Like I said, I personally believe we are in that situation, and depending on how, I don't know how involved you are in politics. I know a lot of anarchists like to stay away from it, but depending on how these next elections go, it could be more imperative than ever. Either way, I don't think we'll be in a great spot, but and so it is kind of, I've never heard that from Stefan Molyneux. I was not really a follower of his philosophy in the slightest before really the last year or two. And, I have my nitpicks, who doesn't, but that's definitely
the only good stuff to be found is 2 years ago and prior, pretty much. I mean, there's some bursts every now and then, but yeah. Anyway, we don't have to get into that.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I've talked about this before too. It was like one of my gateways, and now I kind of look back and but it's cool hearing that. I really enjoy that way of looking at how to frame the idea of the virtues, like you said, from the whole objectivist side of things. So what do you say to people who are there's a what's the best way of putting this? I'm trying to make sure I use my words carefully here. There is a string of...
Oh no, I've made you nervous about your words. I'm sorry.
Not particularly nervous, but you're right. I should be more careful with my word choices. There's a niche string of people who run across the whole anarchist movement. They don't necessarily have to adopt the term collapsitarian, but I've run into resistance before from people who say like, okay, yeah, there are these things that we can do, but none of it matters because we're fighting this oppressive entity that will just either squash you, take you to jail, or make what you're doing illegal. So we have to start with the root problem. We have to tear down everything. Otherwise, none of what you're doing matters. What do you think about, I know it's very pessimistic, but is there any merit to the idea that they're spreading there?
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on that. Where do you want me to begin?
We got plenty of time.
So I think you have to maintain perspective on where we are in the history of the species, and realize that it took 1,000 years to go from a god king to a Roman Republic. And, it's only taken a few hundred years to go from the Roman Republic, which wasn't terribly representative, to kind of a representative democracy. And so it's accelerating, but we're still on like a time scale of generations. We're not on the time scale of weeks or months, So I think Stoicism has a lot to say about stepping back and understanding the truth of the reality that you're currently in. And the truth of the reality that we're currently in is that, while we are accelerating towards freedom, and I don't think you can argue that we aren't accelerating towards freedom, because if you back out to the 4,000 year view, you see a trend line where people's agency, people's control over their own bodies and lives is getting closer and closer to them. Like I said, you go back in time, you got God kings, and then you got like the Roman Catholic Church became the government or whatever, and then slowly and slowly agency moves closer and closer to the person. And right now we're in the representative democracy phase of tyranny, and so where do we go from here? Well, we probably localize the government, and we localize that democratic tyranny until the agency moves closer and closer to the person. And certainly at every step, if you zoom out far enough, you'll see that it's not a straight line. It'll go, and then it'll back up a little bit, and then it'll continue going, and there's blips along the way. Hopefully we're not coming up on one of those blips, but we might be.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like you have to set your expectations in line with reality, and this stuff doesn't change in one generation. It doesn't change usually in 4 generations. It's this is a long process, and I think realizing where you are allows you to set your expectations, which allows you to not get so emotionally jaded in the moment. Like, this is my place in reality, and the best thing I can do to make it better for my kids and my kids' kids is to do X, Y, and Z. And you kind of get zen about it. Like, and agorism is a part of that. Like, I'm going to do what I can to not be robbed from, and show people how to live free that are around me. And I'm going to accept my existence. Like, even like, let's be honest, like most of the space dust in the universe doesn't even have thoughts. And, we're lucky to exist in this state where we can think and consider our situation in life and have agency and have quote unquote rights. And know that we exist and consider philosophy and all this stuff. We are incredibly lucky, even in the state that we are now. So again, Stoicism, I think, has some good things to say that just kind of help you become at peace with where you are in life, and realize that, even though there's bad things and bad people that do actively control you and coerce you every day of your life, you still have a lot of room for agency and a lot of room for joy in life. So that's one of the many things I have to say about, I guess, collapsitarians. But let's see, what else do I have to say about it? Did you have any thoughts on that before I keep ranting? Interrupt me. Feel free.
Well, it's not so much of an interruption as maybe just a slight redirection on the same idea. By the way, I love the talk of mindfulness. I think it's really important to, especially nowadays that we have this culture of like the instant gratification. I think mindfulness is really important to living a fulfilled and happy life outside of just, always looking for the next greatest thing or trying to be your own celebrity. Sometimes you do just need that perspective. So that's really good. What I was going to say, though, is that, I kind of was born in this meme culture of libertarianism. That's how I was introduced. I was a constitutionalist before that, and eventually memes started making me ask questions because I'm weird like that. And now I'm here.
Wait. So memes converted you?
Memes converted me. So, memes didn't...
You are the first one I've ever heard that said they came from the memes. Wow.
It's true.
That's special.
I came from the memes. I won't say that memes wholesale converted me, but memes made me say, is there anything to this?
Yeah.
I was at a position in my political beliefs where I was open to new ideas, where I was looking through all the data and learning and just reading and trying to figure out where I was. And then I ran into this crazy page called Liberty Memes, and they were posting all this wacky stuff. And I'm like, well, let's see what this is about. And well, year and a half later, here I am. I've just gone full-blown anarchist. So, there was a transition phase where I was a minarchist for a little bit, and I was like, anarchy is ridiculous. Yep. And so now here I am.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a part of growing. But
no rational person didn't go through the "that's ridiculous" phase.
Exactly, right.
that's just your indoctrination reacting, right? Your indoctrination hears about anarchy and it just spits out, "Oh, that's crazy talk." That's normal for sure. I remember what else I wanted to say about collapsitarians.
That's fine.
Before
I
lose it. Every time in history when a government has been collapsed, a new government forms, and it's almost always worse than the one that came before, because the hearts and minds of the people weren't changed towards liberty before the collapse came. And so I think it is profoundly dangerous and retarded. Sorry.
No,
Stupid,
you're fine.
Unintelligent.
This is an NSFW show.
to try and collapse the structure around you before having changed enough hearts and minds to keep it from becoming worse than what it is now. That's the only other thing I would say.
No, that's fair. I talk about this idea that I have a terrible name for called transitarianism, which means that as far as my politics are concerned, I will vote for you if you will make demonstrable, meaningful change. You don't have to align perfectly with me. You don't have to be an anarchist. You don't have to be my perfect candidate. But if you will make a measurable, meaningful change towards liberty, we'll be friends. We can make this work. That's a very small list of people, but that's my criteria instead of being completely devoid, because I feel like any progress is better than no progress, in my personal opinion. But
yep, I take a probably more harsh. No, that's not the word. A very staunch. Let's go with staunch. I take a staunch position on voting. That I think if you believe that voting has an effect on the world, meaning if your vote counts, if your vote has the power to win an election, which I think you can make a case for.
Depends.
I think you own the effects of your actions. And so if you think that the action called voting has effects in the world, then you, at least partially in with all the other people that vote, own the effects of that vote. And so if you vote for Obama, that then goes and bombs a bunch of innocent children in another country, you have to own the effects of that vote. So I am very, very careful with this thing called voting. I never want to be party to the crime of 99% of the politicians that have ever existed. So I will rarely vote unless it's, like for a perfect example of a safe vote is like a referendum that decriminalizes something. Like there's no chance really for victims to come from that vote. You're just saying, no, stop doing evil. And that's a pretty safe vote ethically. There's my attempt at the Not Governor campaign in Texas was, it was an experiment to see if it was even possible to run a non-aggression principle compliant campaign, because I initially didn't think it was possible. I thought at some point along the way I would be faced with some kind of decision where I had to convince people to do something unethical, violate the non-aggression principle in some way, or myself would have had to sign on to do something like that. And so it was an experiment to see if it was possible to provide a sort of candidate that promised to not make the people that supported me with their vote culpable for any crimes, any non-aggression principle violations. I wanted to see if that was possible. There's almost no one out there trying to run what I called NAP compliant campaigns, which is, I will, basically my campaign wasn't about like winning and holding office. My campaign was, we had a community of people that got together and wrote a Declaration of Individual Independence, which is one of the most powerful documents I've ever read. It uses kind of the language and feel of the Declaration of Independence for the country, but removes all the collectivist language out of it and removes all the appeals to invalid authority out of it and puts I and me and, by my power, by the power of my volition, I will separate from invalid coercive governments. Really powerful document. I would suggest anybody read it, and you can on notgovernor.com.
Yeah, I'll post a link to it on my Facebook.
Yeah, so my sort of campaign was just kind of bringing that document to the world. People that supported me were voting as activists. That's what I wanted. I didn't want people to vote for me because they thought I would win office and then bring them freedom, because that teaches the wrong lesson. Freedom doesn't come from voting. Freedom comes from your consent not being violated. And no politician can win office and provide you freedom. That's just not how freedom works. That's not how voting works. That's not how government works. And that's the wrong message to be teaching people. So I was very clear when I asked people, if you want to vote for me as an activist to give me a larger platform, a more visible podium to stand behind, to bring the message of actual liberty to as many people as I possibly could. And I mean, I proved my experiment proved that it was possible to do. It was possible to run a NAP compliant campaign, at least for government, at least for governor, at least in Texas. I don't know if it would be possible for president or any other offices, but it was quite an experience. Learned a lot about the Libertarian Party along the way.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did. There's a reason I try to make the distinction between small L and big L libertarians.
Sorry.
No,
I've got memes on a button board over here.
Oh, you're fine. Yeah, I've got my own over here. See, it's a very interesting perspective to take on voting, and I don't have any issue with it. I do think voting is mostly personal. Now, if you tell me you're voting just party lines, I'm gonna question you on that. You know, that's kind of, but if you have a justifiable reason for why you vote the way you do, and you have a method to the madness, I usually don't challenge people. But I'm curious so you bring up this idea towards your philosophy of voting. You know, and I'm positive you are familiar with Spooner and his idea of the defensive vote. What do you think about that perspective of the idea that if I don't vote, somebody else is going to vote in my stead, or at least have a better chance without my vote, and it could curtail my individual liberties? So I have an obligation.
Fantastic question.
Go.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Go ahead. No, sorry.
No.
Continue the setup.
That's really it. I just,
you're bumping, and I'll spike it. Don't worry. Go ahead.
just curtailing your individual liberties, and then next thing you know, you're locked up in chains, and they're free to go. It's metaphorically speaking. So,
yeah, I think Spooner is one of my heroes. I've read every sentence I can find that he ever wrote, and I think the only area he was wrong on was a defensive vote, like all votes being defensive, and I can make the case. So, if let's say you're walking down a street, and it's you and there's other random people walking down the street with you, and a guy comes up, points a gun at you and says, "Give me your wallet." And you pull out your gun defensively, and you fire 6 or 7 times, and you hit 3 or 4 innocent people and the guy. What was that defense? So a vote
technically, but you also hurt other people, so it was an act of, it was both. But
no, like if you intended, if you knew when you fired your gun that those innocents would also be hurt along with the guy. Like a better example would be like you're running a gas station and somebody comes in to rob you, and so you set off a suicide vest and blow up everybody in the store. Like you know that what you're doing will create new innocent victims.
Yeah.
You cannot call that self-defense. You're creating new victims. It's not self-defense if you're creating new victims. That's kind of the headline of what I'm trying to say here. And voting outside of kind of what I described necessarily creates new victims. It helps somebody achieve power that they then use to hurt people. Now, the Lysander, when he described it, described two groups of people. We have this group of people voting, sending their vote bullets at you. And so you join this other group of people to send some vote bullets back the other way in self-defense. The problem is that there's 3 groups of people. There's these vote bullet firers, and there's these vote bullet firers, and then there's this group of people down here that don't vote and don't consent to any of it, and they're not firing bullets at anybody. But unfortunately, group A and B are firing bullets at those people too. And so joining one of the evil groups firing vote bullets at the innocents is not self-defense. So if you can find a way, like I said, very carefully to use your vote bullet in a purely defensive way, like referendums or NAP compliant candidates, then certainly there's no problem. So like other people will say all vote, like anarchists will say all voting, is statism. Well, that's not true either. Like the truth is, like, the effect of your action is what you're culpable for. And if the effects of your actions, even engaging with the state in a thing called defensive voting for a referendum or a NAP compliant candidate, well, if there's no victims, there's no crime, right? So you just got to make sure there's no victims.
It's a very difficult charge to accept, but I mean, you make a fair point. It's something I'll have to consider a little bit more. I'll have to take some time and stew on that because I've really been a big proponent of the defensive voting idea. And like I
Sure.
said, I'll definitely have to sit down and think about that one a little bit more. Maybe I took it too much on face value. But
Well, I don't blame anybody for following Lysander Spooner. He's so good on so many things. That's my only point of disagreement with the guy. It's just that nuanced of, we own the effects of our actions. And if those effects are to cause somebody to gain power that hurts somebody, you cannot shed that culpability.
So I know we're getting slightly off topic, and we'll come back around, but I'm enjoying this line of discussion here. And to continue on with the idea
My time is yours. We'll go wherever you want.
To continue with this idea of Spooner, he talks about, like we said, the replacement of the ballot or the bullet with the ballot. I know there's going to be somebody who listens to this because I get these emails all the time from very estranged people that I've made my position pretty clear on, who I like to call the boogaloo types, who will say, well, this is all pretty clear. I can't vote. None of the things I do matter. So we just got to boogaloo, guys. We just got to do it. We have to lead the charge because if anybody else does it, we'll wind up with statism. And I've made myself pretty clear in my position of the boogaloo. But do you even think that, let's say, I'm going to craft a scenario for you just real quick, and you can branch off from there however you'd like. But worst case scenario, okay? Beto becomes president. First thing that happens is he bans all private health care and makes everything public, increases your taxes 50-fold, and takes your guns. Would you consider that a boogaloo-worthy America? What is happening?
You're going to make me make a statement on this publicly, aren't you?
I would like you to.
So there are things that you shouldn't talk about. There are things that you shouldn't be on record talking about. That's the first thing I'll say. So, I will never say what I don't believe, but I won't say some of the things I do believe sometimes. So
I think innuendo is a powerful tool as well.
I think I will say this. So let me be clear.
If it makes you more comfortable, I will say the fact that I believe there's a lot. I think that's
I'm
pretty
not
fair
if but
okay.
I want to make the case on both sides.
Okay.
So the way I'll do that is by saying, if a government agent that's in charge of making sure grass in a neighborhood comes by my house and says my grass is too long, and hands me a ticket, are they technically threatening me? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are they threatening me with jail? Absolutely. Because if I don't pay the fine, the city escalates to a court, and then the court turns into a warrant, and the warrant turns into cops that will absolutely arrest and cage me. So is this a real threat coming from this little nerd in a little stupid little suit going around taking pictures of the length of people's grass? Is that a threat? Absolutely. Would it be wise for me to behave as if that were a threat in this current day and age, and cock my shotgun and tell them to get the fuck off my lawn? Probably not. That would probably be the worst thing I can do as an activist. And that's what I'm saying. Like, as an activist, we have to measure our actions, weigh the risk versus reward. How can I make the world the most free out of interacting with the length of the grass government agent? Shooting him while you could make an ethical case that it would probably be okay, look, I'm just going to say, on the extreme end, someone could at least try and make the case that might be justified because he is threatening you with physical violence.
There's an argument. There's a NAP compliant argument. I won't say that there isn't, Would I buy it? But
on the other hand, if you did that, would the world become more or less free? Would people look at a freedom fighter's actions and say, I want more of that? And say, that guy's got it right. I like I like that. Let's get more of that in the world. Hell no. The average normie is going to see that action and run the other way. And they're going to condemn it. And they're going to ostracize anybody else that even talks like that guy did. You see this recently, like every time there's some kind of shooting, everybody sifts through every little detail and nitpick every little detail of the person's life and be like, okay, they were a member of the NRA, they were, an Antifa, and they just start collectivizing these ideas into groups of people and then shunning everything. So I think we learn a lot from Martin Luther King. So you have a group of people that were discriminated against, no question. No, there's no argument that they weren't discriminated against by the government in ways that would absolutely ethically justify violence. Right? I don't think we can disagree on that.
No, 100%.
What did Martin Luther King do? He took those people and told them to never be violent. He marched them up the street by the thousands through dangerous neighborhoods where they knew somebody was going to assault them and hurt them. Literally, they knew going into their marches that somebody was going to get hurt because the areas they were marching through were very racist. And they would actually literally start fights and throw bricks and hurt them as they were walking. And what did he tell them to do when they got hurt? Don't respond. March through. Show the world. Oh, what was the quote? It was like, the world will know the truth of our circumstances by the depth of our suffering. Literally, just by marching bravely and suffering in front of the world, he showed, like, people watching them being beaten and harmed and attacked made the people watching sympathetic to their cause. Which is the opposite. Like you can see the opposite in Antifa today. Like, they think they're doing the Lord's work, fighting fascists by being violent asshole children in the streets. But all they're doing is showing everyone, like all the people are watching this and being like, these people are insane. They're violent. Like, so let's say, and this is not the case, but let's say Antifa was right. They are doing the exact wrong thing to convince anybody that they're right by being violent. So even if the violence was justified, they are doing the worst fucking thing you can do to convince the world of your cause. Martin Luther King had it right. Read him, study what he did in that movement. He not only was peaceful about it, but he knowingly and knew that they were going to be punished and injured and used that to convince people. And so if you're going to start the boogaloo, what's going to happen is what we see every time somebody's violent. Everything that you've ever been associated with in your life will be shunned, and people will back away and cringe away from whatever it was, even if you were right. That's the best I can say to it.
No, that's great. I think I agree with everything you said. I personally believe that there is, sometimes for a joke or for a meme, if I know someone is just playing around, ha ha ha, boogaloo, whatever, the big igloo.
Does everybody know what boogaloo is? That's like the meme, right?
Yeah,
everybody. Should we describe what a boogaloo is?
We've talked about it before, but the
Okay.
boogaloo is the idea of the we could say forceful. They would argue it's a defensive reaction to violence from the government, but I don't have a problem saying the forceful overthrowing of what they believe to be what is a tyrannical institution. And so that would involve, whether you call it a civil war or a revolution, however you want to look at it, it is a violent conflict taken apart by sovereign citizens. So that is the fundamental idea of the boogaloo for anybody who isn't aware of it. And, like I was saying, every once in a while, it's funny, someone makes a meme, haha, boogaloo warriors, whatever. But I think there's a dangerous amount of flirtation with the idea, almost a fetishization or romanticization of the idea of the boogaloo that I don't really appreciate. Maybe I'm too much of a pacifist for that, but there is a large subset of the community that really looks at the idea of the boogaloo and says, like, yeah, I would love a boogaloo. And I'm like, have you ever seen someone die before? Have you ever, have you ever killed anybody? I don't think this is actually what you want. I think this is what a modern culture makes you think. But
there is something happening. There is something changing. People are reaching a new point of fed up with the status quo. This is the third conversation I've had on this in the past week.
Yeah.
And before that, people hardly ever asked me about this stuff. People are thinking about, and rightly so, where is the line? When is enough enough? the Revolutionary War was a boogaloo.
Yeah, it was 100%.
Should they have done it? I mean, it's kind of hard to say they shouldn't have.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely succeeded, yeah. In
So
its intended goal.
there is apparently a time and place for a boogaloo.
Like
maybe.
I said, I think there is
but
a line.
no, maybe not. Maybe we have to wake enough people up before we do that. Otherwise, we get another government. Like right now, America is the largest empire the world has ever seen. Well, that resulted from a boogaloo before enough people were woken up to freedom.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think that's the counter argument to boogaloo is if we don't have enough people woke first. If we have, and Larkin Rose will say this, if you've changed enough hearts and minds, the boogaloo becomes unnecessary. The government just gets ignored out of existence. And if you don't have enough hearts and minds changed, the boogaloo will just put you in a position that's worse than probably what you started with. So I don't know that a boogaloo is necessary anymore.
Even the founders spent over a decade priming the people for this revolution before they even started it. John Adams, people like him were writing these pamphlets, were writing about the tyranny of Great Britain before it even started getting that bad. And then whenever everything had finally gotten to the point where they said, okay, everybody's pissed off, now we can do this, there were still loyalists who stuck around. So is it possible to win everybody's hearts and minds? No, but I do think that there is a case to be made that you have to at least have the majority opinion of the public. Because if you don't, and I hate the 51 over the 49, but if we're talking some kind of macro politics scale like this, you can't be 5% of the population and say, we're going to free everybody,
No, I think 5 or 10% is like, first of all, what's the voting percentage? Like 30% of the public votes?
Exactly.
Like 30% of the public is engaged with it. And so let's say that you just need a majority of the voting type people, the people that take action to modify their life. You get even a third of those people. You probably have enough to begin ignoring the government out of existence.
Exactly.
The rest of the people will follow along with the freedom that they see other people getting.
And a lot less people have to die if we do that.
I'm not on board with the boogaloo because like I think I've made the case clear enough. If we don't wake enough people up first, it's going to be, not only is a lot of people going to die in the process, but we're probably going to end up worse than we started. And if we do wake enough people up, the boogaloo, the revolution becomes unnecessary. So I don't think violence is the answer. I think waking people up is the answer. That said, the boogaloo memes are cathartic, and it's like a pressure release for the people that feel day to day their control and their oppression and their constant threat and tax, and like they're being stolen from, they're being regulated and controlled at every moment of every day of their life. And it just feels good to drop a spicy meme about the boogaloo because sometimes that'd be really nice, It's just to be like, I've had enough. And so, if the memes are a release valve for that, man, meme on, man. Fine. Yeah. People need a valve for that, right? Meme it out. Yes, your commenter, Night Mary, says meme it out. Exactly. I really think the trend line of history means eventually the world will be free. I don't think that's even arguable, really, if you zoom out and look. But you also have to realize where we are in history. And so if we want the world to be free for our kids, the strategy is to parent better and live peacefully and wake people up. And I think we're playing a long game here. We're not playing a short game. And you don't play long game with politics or votes or boogaloos. You play long games with parenting. And you raise children that are awake, that don't enter their existence with an involuntary authority in their life called a strong authoritative parent or whatever. You raise them like equals, peacefully. You don't control them like most parents do. You raise them to expect a world that doesn't forcibly control them every moment of their life. And that way, when they hit adulthood and somebody tries to control them, they will instinctually, naturally know that external control is invalid and out of place and wrong. That's a long strategy. That takes generations, but that is how you actually change things, by changing children, by raising different people.
No, I mean, I completely agree. And I just have one more comment to make on the Boogaloo, and I actually kind of want to continue on with that similar line of thought, kind of tying it back to earlier as well. But, I have openly made the statement numerous times that gun control is bad ethically for hundreds of reasons, and why you can't permissibly take weapons from people who have done nothing wrong in their entire lives, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. I'll be honest, at this point, the ethics are great, and that's more motivation than I really need to make that claim. But it scares me to death to think about the fact that if some, like I said, if Beto became president and the AR-15 was illegal tomorrow, people are going to die from that. People who didn't have to die are going to die. And I hate the idea
rightly
of that.
so.
Yeah, I mean,
I want to be clear on the ethics of it. Like if like the cops that do the red flag confiscations that get shot and die, I'm like, oh well, you shouldn't have fucking done that, idiot.
No knock warrants. Like I have no sympathy for you. I don't have sympathy for knock warrants. But
and so if like that, the optics of that situation are kind of different than the traditional Boogaloo optics, right? Like you have a guy that's peacefully existing in his house, and the cops show up to steal his property because some politicians passed a law. That the optics of that's different. Like maybe it's less insane, for a person to fight back in that scenario to the general public. But still, there's still going to be people that'll be like, well, he should have just, turned it over and sued him in court or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's but look, like you have to decide where your line is. My line is going to be different than your line for when is enough, because look, I've been talking about like this Zen zoom out, take a stoic view on life and realize your place in the thousands of years of the species of humans. But let's talk about the other side. You only live once. You're going to be alive for X number of years more from today, and you need to choose what you stand for, and you need to decide where your line is and live how you want to live, and have your life come to an end how you think it needs to, when you think it needs to, because it's your life. You only live once. So like I like people that are principled and are willing to put action behind principle. But if you're trying to change the world, violence is almost never the way. Like I'm trying to think of examples in which violence really turned out well on a zoomed out scope. I mean, there's brief like from a group of independent people, like not government on government violence, but like Revolutionary War might be an example. A lot of people were free of a government for 100 years or so. I don't know. It's sticky. It's not like I can give you a blanket answer either. Like if there is an issue, if there is a line that maybe should be someone's line, it's having your guns taken, because that's a watershed moment in the history of a population.
Yeah,
like you don't come back from that. It's not like a populace has ever been disarmed by their government and then a generation later rearmed. Like that just doesn't happen. Like that's a right you don't get back once you lose. So maybe that should be the line.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and I'm not necessarily making a statement either way. More is the observation that if there was ever, in my opinion, going to be something that sparked a Boogaloo in my lifetime, that's probably going to be it. Americans have made it extremely clear, especially gun-owning Americans, that most of them, anyways, that you aren't going to take their guns. You're going to take them over their dead bodies. And I just hate the idea of a bunch of people thinking that they're doing the right thing and passing some kind of legislation. There are people out there who legitimately think they're doing the right thing and passing some kind of weapons confiscation or pro weapons confiscation legislation. And all I can think of this in the back of my head is like, okay, how many people are going to die from this? 12, 100, 1,000? Because it's not going to just be everybody hands over their guns, and it didn't have to be this way. I guarantee you it will outweigh any number of mass shootings over the last couple of years. I guarantee it. Put me on the books, people. Quote me. I promise if it passes, it will be way worse than any mass shootings. So that's more of my warning, my concerns being aired.
Well, at least unlike mass shootings, at least the people getting shot will hopefully be the people doing the immoral stuff, the confiscating.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean it's tough.
It's
tough. I can't tell somebody not to defend themselves.
No, 100%. If you are an adult who understands the non-aggression principle and how to implement it, and the non-aggression principle is you're complying it in your actions, you won't see me out there telling you that I might say you morally made the wrong call, but ethically you're as consistent as you need to be. You followed the nap. So can I say what I don't like what you did? Sure, that's fine. Anybody can say that. But to say that you are wrong in doing so is if as long as you're nap compliant, then you're what I usually say to people when they ask questions that are difficult to answer like this is that the nap gives you all of the tools. You understand it. You're an adult. And nothing I tell you is going to be like, hopefully you're not making your decision based off of what I say, basically, is what it comes down to. Because your life is more important than what I have to say. So.
And the cost benefit is different for everybody. Like I have children.
Exactly.
So they have to become my life's priority. And so if it came down to me being disarmed or me not being a father to my kids, I would choose to continue being a father to my kids. And that's the choice I made. When you choose to have children, you have to put their life above your own. Other people without children might have different cost benefit analyses that would result in Beto triggering a boogaloo for them. So, and it's an amazing illustration of the blind spot that people have to government violence. That Beto's statement in that debate, and then that Texas politician saying, "Well, my AR-15's ready for you, Beto," and then like the entire left freaking out and saying, "You're threatening Beto, a presidential candidate." And I'm sitting here screaming, "He threatened us first!" Like people don't see Beto looking you in the eye and saying, "I'm going to take your property, peaceful person." They don't see that as a threat because he's doing it through the magic spell system of the government. People don't see it. And so when you respond to a threat with a counter threat, people are like, "You're threatening him." Well, he started it. Tell him to stop threatening me and I won't threaten him back. Like these people don't see.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy. I try to avoid being the guy who's like, "Oh, those silly sheep," because it wasn't more than 2.5 years ago, maybe a little bit less than that I was in the same position of the quack like a duck, waddle like a duck, Maybe it's a little bit more.
Never
forget
that. Never forget where you were, because it's easy. Years go by and you start like human brains work like that. They other people, like people that have things wrong. You'll just start to think of them as different than you, and don't let that happen.
Exactly.
They're normal people. They're just like you. They just don't have wisdom that you currently possess. That's all.
They just need the right convincing, and everybody has their own path. So I am going to kind of take us on a different tangent. This was great. I'm so glad that we got to talk about this. But I kind of want to bring it back to where we were before.
Hopefully I'm not going to get red flagged now. So
I probably am already on some sort of list because I've taken pictures with my guns before and they're on the internet like 4 years ago. So yeah, here we go. Red flag. But you mentioned having children. We've talked about kids a couple of times now and parenting in this conversation. And I kind of wanted to bring this back to where we started and perhaps maybe a lighter note. And do you consider homeschooling your children to be a form of promoting your anarchist, libertarian, voluntarist ideas? And by the way, on top of that, do you homeschool your children? And if not, why?
So most of the activism people see me do is marching in the streets, politics, YouTube videos, conversations on Discord server, talking about principles. But my real activism is principled parenting. That's how I'm actually changing the world. And so what I'm doing is getting ready to start producing a lot of content around parenting, because I'm telling you, this is the key. This is how we do it. We raise people differently, because when you enter the world as a child, you accept, all humans, all creatures, when you're born, you accept the reality with which you're presented. If you're born and the sun is blue, you will never consider why it's blue. The entire life will go by and you'll be like, well, the sun's blue. That's normal. That's just how we function. And so the conditions you set up in your home fashion how they view the world for the rest of their life. If it's abusive, they will expect abuse and they will feel uncomfortable when not being abused by somebody. That's the life story of many people. If it's peaceful and principled and ethical, then when somebody confronts them that isn't peaceful and ethical, they will stand out like a flashing red flag beacon, and they'll know to avoid them or to be cautious of them or to be ready to defend themselves against them. Changing how you parent is just, it's everything. If you want to change the world, if you're not playing the short game, if you're playing the long game, you have to parent principled. My talk, man. So this is kind of unofficial, let's say, at this point, but I'll maybe be speaking on the main stage of Anarchapulco this year. And my talk this is the first time I'm mentioning this to literally anyone, will be on what I'm calling principled parenting. Because for a long time, people have talked about peaceful parenting. And I don't want to give too much away yet, because I'm not even sure if I'm supposed to talk about it yet. But when people ask me what I consider myself, I usually don't say anarchist for many reasons. But one of the reasons why is that telling somebody you're an anarchist tells them what you don't want. You don't want rulers. I tell people I'm a voluntarist. That tells people what I do want. There's two sides to that coin. I don't want control, and I do want voluntary relationships with everybody in my life. Peaceful parenting tells people what you don't want, what you don't do to your kids. You don't hit them or violate their body property or their consent. What I'm trying to introduce people to is the idea of principled parenting, which is going to tell people what you do. How do you raise your kids? What environment do you create in your home that fashions how your children will see the world for the rest of their life, and their children's 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 children will see the world for the rest of their life? And it will affect every relationship they ever have. So for example, and I don't want to get too far into this because it's going to be my talk at Anarchapulco, and I'm not even near done with it yet. But just to give you a quick TLDR on it, we have property rights in my house. I own things, my wife owns things, and my children own things, and we respect each other's property. If my kid owns a tablet, if my kid does something wrong, or just does something, I don't just like go up and ground him from his tablet. I don't have that right. It's not my property. It's his property. And so when he damages something of mine, we sit down and talk. Well, you damaged my property. We need to talk about how you're going to make restitution for that. How, what are you going to do to maybe earn money or something to pay me back for the property that you damaged? We have, what other principles? Dispute resolution is a big thing. So, if we don't want people to depend on this all-seeing eye authority of government to handle all their justice and dispute resolution court system, we have to not just be peaceful, not just not hit our kids. Like, that's what we don't do. Yeah, we got that. That's like 101 ethics. Got it. Okay. But what do you actually do? How do you actually teach your kids to resolve disputes without depending on you as a parental authority figure? Well, we have this thing called mediators. And anybody in the house can be asked to be a mediator in any dispute. And, right now when my kids are younger, oftentimes they're asking me and my wife to be the mediator just because we're more adept and we're better at it because we're older. But oftentimes my wife and I will maybe go to a kid and ask them to be a mediator in some dispute just to give them the experience. And so then what the mediator does is they become sort of like the lawyer of the kid. And so, my daughter will come up to my office and she'll knock on my door and she'll come up and say, "Dad, I wanted donuts." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Why didn't you have donuts?" "Well, Mom wouldn't give me any of her donuts." And I'm like, "Well, did you ask why?" And she said, "Yeah. Can you be my mediator?" And that's what she says right now. She's like, "Can you help me make a deal?" And so that's how they think. They think in terms of making deals and
awesome.
compromises to get what they want. And so I'll stand up for my dad. I'll stop whatever I'm doing, usually, if I'm not some kind of super work mode. And I'll take her hand and I'll walk downstairs and I'll be like, "Mr. Smith, my client, Dagny Smith, has acquired my services in the matter of Dagny Smith v. Mama Smith, in the matter of the donuts. My client would like to make a deal to have, how many donuts do you want?" And, so we start hashing it out. "You want 2? You want 5 donuts? Okay. My client would like 5 donuts. What say you?" And so like, my wife will come back and be like, 5 donuts? Are you crazy? If I give her 5 of my donuts, she'll be sick and then I won't have any donuts. And so I'll be like, I don't think she wants to give you 5 donuts. How about we ask for 1? And my daughter would be like, okay. And I'll be like, okay, Mrs. Smith, my client would like 1 donut. And my wife will be like, well, I've been asking her to pick her her toy properties up off my living room floor for the past hour and she hasn't done it yet. So I will offer her 1 donut if she picks up her toys. Dagny, what do you think? Is that a good deal? If you pick up your toys, she'll give you 1 donut. And my daughter will be like, yeah, that's a deal. And I'll be like, Mrs. Smith, my client has accepted your offer. And so like, that is how disputes are resolved in my home. And my kids are, let me tell you something. My kids are like 5 and 6 years old right now, and they can already negotiate better than most adults I meet in my life. The world is not ready for my children. They are going to be able to negotiate their way in and out of everything. It is quite a sight to see. And so that's what I'm talking about. We have to talk about what we do want in parenting, and this is how we change the world. So that's kind of the TLDR of what I'm hoping to put together for my talk at Anarchapulco.
No, that's awesome.
My tentative talk. I'm not announcing anything right now. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. I gotcha. Copy. That's really crazy. And I will just be completely transparent. I've been ridiculed for this idea before because I'm supposed to have thousands of libertarian babies who are anarchists and who go out and make more anarchist babies. I'm still young. The idea of parenting is not something that really is alluring to me at the moment. Hope maybe later on down the road that will be something I'm more interested in. But I am interested in the process of parenting, not so much being a member of the practice, but I definitely think that there is a huge value in having children, raising them correctly, raising them ethically. Because once you look back on how parenting is supposed to be done, and you look back at your own life, it really can. I love my parents to death. I love my mom. I love my stepfather, and they did the best job they could with the resources that they had. But I think if I had been given, say, a childhood kind of like yours was, I can definitely see how those would have more directly transferred into skills that would be applicable to me as an adult, as a volunteerist, as, all sorts of things. And I think there's a lot of value in that, a lot of value. So I commend that.
Yeah, so I'm giving them skills that will probably give them superpowers when they're adults. But here's the activism. Here's where the rubber meets the activism. This is the long game. Mm-hmm. When my kids hit 18 and somebody comes up to them and says, here's a ticket because I thought you were going too fast. And my kids say, well, what do you mean a ticket? And they're like, well, I've decided that the law says that you're only allowed to go this fast on this road, and I'm going to demand that you pay $200. It's probably going to be $500 by that time with inflation, but I'm going to demand that you pay me money. And they're going to be like, well, how about we make a deal and I'll just agree to, maybe go slower next time. No, that's not how it works. You're going to show up to this court date and you're going to give us money because it's the law, because I said so, because that's the system. That's the government says so. I'm like, how do you think a person raised how I'm raising them is going to think about that?
Very poorly.
Unlike everyone, the way they're raised with an authoritative parent that tells them what they're doing and why they're doing it, and requires that they ask permission for everything that they do in every moment of every day, they're going to hit 18 and they're going to realize that their parental authority figure has just been replaced by this government authority figure. In fact, they're going to expect there to be an authority figure outside and for the rest of their life, because that was the reality that they were born into as children. And if there isn't one, that would make them feel uncomfortable. If there isn't a government controlling them, that would be the weird thing. That would be like, well, something's wrong here. Nobody's setting rules for me. My kids are going to be the opposite. My kids are going to hit adulthood and they're going to be like, who the fuck are all these people trying to tell me what to do? And like, I'm trying to make deals with them. And they're just like, no, here's a gun. Give me money. They're going to be like, that's fucking evil. What's wrong? Everyone's crazy. We have to change this. That's how you change the world, folks. That's how you change the world. I'm telling you the secrets that I've discovered. That's how you actually change the world.
No, 100%.
I'm like tearing up here because this is important.
It is a powerful idea, right? It is 100%. I mean, it's the same idea. This is why so many people fear the idea of like raising gender neutral children, and it's like, no, you're not a boy, you're a girl. You're not, you get to decide. You can think whatever you want about that morally, but I think we have reason enough to believe through science that there is a significant amount of influence that your environment that you're raised in has on you as an adult. I'm sure I would not be nearly as open-minded and introspective of a person if that was not fostered into me through my childhood. That's one thing I definitely love, especially from my mother. If I wanted a book about whatever it was, I mean, she bought me this like 20-year-old encyclopedia set once because I kept asking her questions. And she said, stop asking me questions, find it in the encyclopedia so you can get your answers. And, that kind of, it's the little things, but I definitely believe that what you were saying about, building the tomorrow through your children, that being the activism, that is incredibly powerful. I don't think people should underestimate that at all. You're literally creating potentially an entire generation plus of these volunteers, these anarchists, these activists, these people who just want to live their lives and who don't need that power structure in their lives, who haven't been raised into a world where it's required. And I think, like you said, that's so important, so very important.
That's the secret. That's the long game. If you really want to change the world, you do it with your children.
Yeah. So I do want to, again, kind of take a step maybe to the side this time. And we've talked about things that you can do kind of passively in your life, more actively, very actively, in fact, with raising children. It's a very active process. But so, like you said, you are known to a lot of people by your involvement on the March on the Street types of activism. There's been all sorts of different sort of, whether it's a convention, whether it's an actual march or protests in front of City Hall, or however you want to conglomerate as your particular group. Do you have, as someone who's been a part of quite a few of these things, would you have any sort of guidelines or recommendations perhaps for either someone who wanted to get started getting into this kind of activism, or someone who just is interested in it? Things like that.
What kind of activism?
The actual on the streets marching, being a part of protests, stuff like that. The other side of activism, I guess you could call it.
Well, first set your expectations. Like I start here with everything. It seems like these days I'm so zen. I'm sickening myself. No, but like set your expectations. If you think you're going to get 10,000 people together to march the streets and government will listen to you and change some law, like fucking don't. Like the government has learned to allow people to bitch because it lets them vent, and it kind of disarms their anger, and then they just go back to their job and keep paying their taxes. So the government will let you march in the streets all you want. Typically, the government will even defend your right to do so, even if you're marching to dissolve the government. They're not going to stop you, because stopping you would send the message that they don't want sent to the general public. So make sure that you're not marching to change the government. Make sure you're marching for another reason, like to let people exert their self-ownership in a real world sort of way. The best example is our guillotine march recently. We built a guillotine. This was back during the time of the Yellow Vest stuff over in France. We built a literal guillotine in my front yard, and we got a bunch of people together to open carry rifles, and we pushed this guillotine. Well, we marched behind this guillotine all the way to the biggest courthouse in Dallas, and we pushed that fucker up the steps of the courthouse, and we sat it right in front of the courthouse. And then we had a big rally where we had speakers talk about freedom from government and coercion right in front of the Dallas courthouse, in front of a guillotine. And did we think that doing that was going to scare the judge, the judicial system into prosecuting less victimless crimes. Hell no. Like that's not, the government doesn't care when you march. But what it did do was it got a lot of people out on the streets to put their feet and their ass where their principles were. And they marched with weapons in public behind a guillotine, and then they stood and listened to inspirational liberty speeches. That helps people, like that bolsters the spirits, and it unifies people behind the principles of liberty. That's why we did it. And we were wildly successful in doing that. And then as a side goal, we also had a speaker talk about jury nullification, which is a very practical, that's the short game, like jury nullification, those kind of tactics. I don't know if you've talked about that on here much, but the ability to be on a jury and say not guilty can literally free people from victimless crimes. Like today, that's a thing you can do today. And so we had a guy talk about that.
I saw that news spot from the lady who came to interview you guys there on the news and asked about jury nullification. I was like, oh my God, is this actually happening? Are they really asking? I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah. That's a success. The event was worth it, probably just for that, minute of news exposure. So, other street activisms, like you have to talk about the Feed the Need. That's the quintessential, that is the best example of street activism I have ever seen in my entire life for many reasons. The main reason is that no one realizes that it's illegal to feed the homeless in Texas.
Yeah.
And so when you tell people that, I've never met a person and told them, and then being like, oh yeah, we know.
I'm from Houston,
like,
so
what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I almost got a ticket for it in Houston. I couldn't believe it. I bought a guy a Subway sandwich, and this cop was like, don't give him that. I'm gonna have to write you a ticket. And I was like, you're gonna have to do what to me? Excuse me, sir?
Write me a ticket, you fucking tyrant. Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's an issue that no one thinks is immoral. Like, I don't care if you're far right, far left, far crazy, like we're feeding the homeless. Like no one is going to be like, oh no, you shouldn't do that. And so it's the perfect issue to use to make a stand against the government with publicly. And so I don't know if your viewers are familiar with this event, maybe you've talked about it before. We can go into it as deep as you want, but the headline is that, we have a bunch of people open carrying rifles and guns and weapons while feeding the homeless illegally in Dallas. A church group in other cities in Texas have been arrested when they've tried to do this, and we've done it 6 years in a row, and the cops leave us the hell alone. And
I wonder why that is
the point.
Wonder why.
We talk about the line in the sand we've been talking about earlier today, and we talk about the optics of when, you should boogaloo. Well, if you boogaloo over a speeding ticket, the optics of that are going to be entirely against you from the general normie public. But if you boogaloo over feeding the homeless, the world is going to be like, why the hell did you try and stop those people from feeding the homeless? Are you insane? That is evil. Like, not everybody. There's plenty of bootlickers, sure.
Yeah.
But at least the optics of that are going to be much more in your favor. So, I mean, we're doing it again this year. It's going to be middle to end of December. It's going to be Feed the Need number 7, and it's going to be awesome. So come on out if you're in the area.
Yeah, December. I'll be back home. I should. Dallas, right?
Where do you live in Dallas?
Well, I live in Houston, but.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
we're in Dallas. Yep.
Not that terribly far of a drive. Maybe I will have to come down. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, come on out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that makes the point. Like, people are like, what's the Second Amendment for? Is it for hunting? No, it's for feeding the homeless. When feeding the homeless is illegal, that's what the Second Amendment's for. Like that there is no clearer message. Like, you should stand up to an immoral government. When should you do it? Oh, when they try and stop you from feeding people that are hungry. That's a good way. I haven't found people disagree with me yet. Like, that's what it's for. So it's a great event. And the other reason why the Feed the Need event is so cool is because, and I have to shout out, Don't Comply, the Don't Comply crew. They're the one that invented this and put it together and help run it every year. They bring together all different types of activists for one brief moment of changing the world. And this doesn't usually happen. Like, you have your philosophers that philosophize, you have your media producers that make videos. You've got, charity people that go and help people, and you've got street activists that do guillotines in the streets and stuff like that. But this event brings everyone together. Like, we have your militia types there running security. We have the charity people organizing all the resources to bring to feed people, and we go back out at night, and we actually give tents to people sleeping on the ground. Like, it blew my mind the first time I went out and saw this. I had no idea that people literally sleep on the concrete at night in the winter. And so we go back out at night and we give them tents to sleep in. So they're slightly warmer tents and sleeping bags, things like that, which after the event last year, I think Dallas might be the state. I don't remember if it was the city or the state made the tents illegal. So there's going to be an additional point of contention this year that there wasn't last year. Should be interesting and exciting. Yeah, so it brings all the different types, the charity types, the activist types, the media, the video people, everybody comes out and chips in their own way, and we do a really good job, and we make a really important statement. So it's a great event.
100%. See, that's that kind of event right there. Where I'm from, Houston has a fair share of activism. It's a very large city. There's usually some kind of protest going on somewhere about something, and most of what you see is, they've got their fences on the side of the road saying, aliens are abducting your brainwaves. You have to stop them, or whatever their hot topic issue is. And every once in a while, you'll get libertarians or of all shapes and sorts, mostly big L's, coming out and, they'll go and they'll do a march somewhere, or they'll stand out in front of a building and talk about libertarianism and why you need the third option and whatnot. But really, I have never seen something in my area besides just recently after I'd already left for something like that. Something like you have to, when you're doing these kind of things, this, maybe not everybody shares this opinion, but you to a certain extent have to be outspoken about what you're doing. Because there's a certain amount of time, a point where if your activism is almost too passive, it's not even really activism. It's just, instead of saying words on the internet, you're saying words in public. That's cool. You got everybody together. But I think when you're feeding the homeless, armed against the law, making a statement about that has so much more impact on people. Forget the institution. They probably don't care. They probably hate you for it, honestly. It has probably very minimal impact on what they're going to do, but it has an impact on people. And that's something that I think we need to focus more on. We're not trying to win over the government. It's if you are, you're probably a little bit focusing in the wrong direction, in my opinion. We have to win the people. And I hope that's what this conversation has made very clear, is that we keep coming back to the fact that you can focus on institutions as much as you want, but really, institutions are nothing without their people.
There is no freedom in politics. And I'm making that as a hard line statement. There is no freedom to be found in playing politics. And I've been as far into that process as one can reasonably get to make that statement. You achieve freedom by changing the hearts and minds of the people around you. You achieve freedom by curating the people in your life and making sure that they're good people, that are principled people, that understand basic ethics like the golden rule that the non-aggression principle is. That's the path to freedom. Agorism, by just kind of living your life as free from coercion as possible. Now the activism, yeah, absolutely. The feed the need type stuff is some of the best activism I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's definitely top tier stuff. Well, I think I have a list here. I'm making sure I checked all the boxes because it definitely had some things I wanted to ask you about, but we had some awesome tangents in there as well. Is there anything you specifically wanted to talk about today? Because I've talked about all the things I wanted to talk about, but is there anything you had in mind that you wanted to share?
I'm good. We can talk about whatever. Do we have any questions? Any?
Oh yeah, that's good too.
I've been struggling. So I go on long philosophical insanities occasionally. So like right now there's two areas of philosophy that I don't think are well rounded enough, and I've been thinking a lot of free will lately. So we can discuss that if you want. I have arrived at a position that I really hate.
So have I. I did an entire episode on consciousness and free will, and I hate what I had to say. Yeah.
Why don't you start then? What do
Okay.
you think about free?
So I was on this probably. Oh, by the way, Liberty Late Night says he can't remember what your favorite color is.
What?
Liberty Late Night, they asked you what your favorite color was on their show, and he said he can't remember. Would you please remind him?
Silver, black, and blue.
There we go. Yeah. So they're actually here. David and Mary are both in the chat right now watching, so they're big fans.
Hey guys.
Yeah. So I had done an extensive amount of reading, and I started with some more introductory texts like Consciousness by Anaka Harris, which is, I say introductory text, that is such a fantastically comprehensive overview of everything else that I've read up to this point. And I've gone all sorts of different ways with this. And I think the two questions are more closely intertwined than people like to go with, but specifically free will. I have come to the conclusion that based off of all of the science, all of the rationalization, all of the evidence that we have today, there is nothing that we can measure, show, or expose that says that we legitimately have entire autonomous free will over our bodies. And that's not an opinion that libertarians like. They hate it.
And it's a shitty position, isn't it?
It is, but I have to be honest. You know, I can't. I'm not going to lie about it.
So, like, here's what it is. It is what it is. No, here's what it is. Like, our consciousness runs inside of our brain. Do we disagree on that? Like, I'm kind of talking to your audience, maybe as well as you, but like, you have to kind of start with that question. Where does this consciousness run? What is the hardware that exists in reality that your consciousness runs on? It's like software running on hardware. And so if we exist in our brains, which, you know, is kind of obviously where our thinking happens, right? That's kind of where the consciousness happens. That hardware exists in reality. That means that hardware is bound by the laws of reality. That means that there's nothing random and magical between the neurons in our brain that provides something that provides free will. And then you have to ask, well, what is free will? What does that mean? Free will is not random. Like, if free will was random, then we'd be just kind of picking a direction randomly and walking in it at a random moment of every random day. Like, we don't make decisions randomly. Free will is not random. So a lot of people think of free will as like will that is unfettered by outside coercion. But I don't really think that's what most people actually mean by free will. Like, being able to make a decision without being threatened, I don't think is what people think of as free will. I think people think of free will as being like your consciousness sort of manufactures decisions out of the ether, not bound by physics. But your decisions are actually literally formed between your neurons in your brain. And those neurons don't function randomly. They function according to laws of nature. They are governed by the laws of this reality that we live in. And the reality that we live in means that those neurons function deterministically, which means that they act in a certain specified way according to the laws of nature. That means if you put input ABC in, you will always get output DEF out.
And you can find trends. That's important too.
And that is to say that, like, so like, if free will can't exist in the way most people think of it, because our brains don't function in that way. So like, this machine that spits out decisions has to exist somewhere. Where does it exist? It's either in this reality, in another reality, but that's not an out, because whatever the rules are of that reality would still be, they would either be random or they would be deterministic just based on those rules. So it's still like not free will. It's just based on the rules of a different universe. And again, it can't be random, because we don't make decisions randomly. That would be the definition of like insanity. That would be the definition of non-consciousness. That would just be random movements. Even animals are more conscious than that, right? So, yeah, it's a really uncomfortable place to be if you think about it like that. But I also like to put a positive spin on it. I think of like Data from Star Trek, who's I think maybe my favorite sci-fi character. I'm a nerd, and so I've consumed a lot of sci-fi, but I think he might be my favorite character ever. And you can kind of see by looking at that character how a mind that functions deterministically can still be very much conscious and can still very much make decisions and can still, and this is the important part, like when Data encounters a new situation, it can change how he thinks. He can modify himself. He can modify his own programming, modify his hardware running on that objective hardware according to the new situations that he encounters, so that he behaves differently. And you know, all of this stuff can still exist, and certainly culpability for decisions still exists. And you know, this is not an ethical out. Like you still own the effects of your actions. But yeah, like as long as it's like you have to take ownership of your software in a way. Like you're responsible for your own code. So, you know, compose yourself better. You know, that's kind of how I've been thinking about it lately. This is still an uncomfortable position for me, though, and I'd still like to have somebody prove me wrong, but I keep debating people, and it hasn't happened yet. So
I will be honest. If you find someone, call me, because I am pretty much in the same position as you are. But the farther I try to dig, and I'm like, I have it. Then the next thing you know, I'm just even further into there's no free will camp. But I watched a documentary from a neuroscientist, talking about free will, and he said you should treat your body almost as if it's your dog. He said you can train it, you can try to influence it. And if your dog bites someone, you're still responsible for your dog biting someone. You can't just say, "Oh, well, he's a dog; he's gonna bite things," you know. And I think while that might be a little bit too out there, or maybe a little bit too far of an analogy, I think it works. I think if you're willing to run with it, it works. And it's easy for people to understand, I think, is important. Maybe it is an oversimplification, but
it also gives you a little bit of extra empathy. I mean, we can go into the nerdiness of the language, but I consider empathy to be separate from sympathy. So sympathy is when you agree with somebody, and like you would agree that they made the right decisions and they found themselves in the same situation. If you were in the same situation, you would have made the same decisions. That's sympathy.
Yeah.
Empathy is different. Empathy is when you can realize, look, I don't agree with what your situation is, and I don't agree with the decisions that you made, but you know, I feel for you. And so it allows you to empathize more with people that end up doing bad things, which result in bad outcomes for their life. Like, and that's weird, because I think you'd think it'd be the opposite. Like, if you thought people didn't have this magical supernatural free will machine that allowed them to make decisions, like some people think that somehow, you know, you should be more empathetic. Well, that kind of makes less sense, right? Because if their decisions are being made by some source that doesn't exist in the real world, well, like that's closer to insanity, not farther away in a way. And so like you can kind of empathize with somebody that makes bad decisions more, because you can realize that they're a product of a long string of some shit that they brought on themselves, but also a lot of shit that was done to them. Maybe they had an abusive upbringing, or an alcoholic parent, or, you know, maybe they've got a genetic situation in their brain that makes them more violent, or, you know, like it's like, wow, you know, if I had been exposed to all the same circumstances that person was exposed to, it's very possible that I would have taken the same action. You can empathize with that.
Yeah.
Like if I had the same genes and the same parents and the same upbringing and the same life circumstances, you know, it's possible that you would have made the same decisions.
In fact,
and so you can a little more compassion in there, I guess.
Yeah, and that's the case that Sam Harris makes all the time. Is that he says the next time someone like has an attitude with you and you want to tell them to fuck off, he said just think, like, this person is obviously going through something today, or has had something to affect them in some way to where this is their biological response. Through determinism, you know, it's not like he just randomly popped out of the womb one day and was like, oh, I'm going to be a salty person for the rest of my life. You know, there are circumstances that led to this, whether they're justifiable or not, and whether you want to say that these are more or less in this person's control, quote unquote, of their particular state of mindfulness. Whether he calls it training your brain, but there is, I think, a certain amount of empathy there that can be very useful and very helpful when interacting with people. Something I've noticed just in my interactions is that, you know, I deal with a lot of salty people all the time who are very upset about everything all of the time. And I think it's a lot easier when I used to get very annoyed whenever they'd, you know, come out with these extremely pessimistic, but I don't know. It's almost given me an opportunity to step back and say, well, instead of saying this person is making just being this salty person, which is, it's fair, they are doing that, but why is it that way? Why are these things happening? What is the root cause here? Is there anything I can do to help? And it's a more productive perspective, in my opinion. Some people might disagree.
I mean, it's at least more, man, I keep going back here today. This is weird. Stoic. Like, it's just kind of recognizing the reality for what it is, and recognizing that reality allows you to deal with it with more agency. So like, if you understand that, look, it's somewhere between 40 and probably 75% of a person's IQ is determined genetically. And, the scientists will argue on both sides, but that's kind of the range. Between 40 and 75, 80% of your IQ is determined by your genetics. Let's say it's 40%. Fine. So if 40% of your overall intelligence is determined by your genetics and not by your upbringing or anything within your control, then certainly 40% of the rest of your personality can be determined genetically. So, like I look at my son, and like he does this like this hyper focus thing, and this is very characteristic of my entire life. It's kind of like a superpower, but in other ways it's like a vulnerability. It's a big problem. So like it's actually a symptom of a different type of ADHD. It's like the opposite of ADHD, where when I set my mind to something, it's sort of like the rest of the world goes dark, and I can concentrate and focus and formulate ideas and come up with new ideas on whatever I'm working on better than most people I know. But while I'm doing that, literally nothing around me exists, and people can talk to me and like sometimes even touch me, and like it's just this hyper focus thing. And so I see that in my son. Well, where did he get that? Like, it's not like we raised him to be hyper focused. No, like it's part of who he is. And so kind of realizing that everyone is like that. Everyone was dealt a certain circumstance that was out of their control, and they're dealing with their own personal pile of shit in the world as best they can. There's some empathy there. So,
yeah, it's funny. We bring up Stoicism. I'm by no means an Epicurean, but I do enjoy his readings. It's very, like everybody in the chat says, it's very Zen. It's very, Stoicism. I really like his journal. What was it called? The Thoughts of, something to that effect. Epicurean's journal that he released, or that was released after his death. I love his exercises. I don't usually do them. I probably should, but comparing yourselves to your virtues, making progress, journaling, meditation, finding mindfulness. I think these are things that are, whether they have any direct correlation to the idea of free will, I still believe, and most people who I talk to about this issue, no matter how educated they are on it, still believe that mindfulness may not be free will, but it's the next closest thing. It is the best way to train your brain, to have the ability to intake and to, like you were talking about with data, to assess a situation and to sort of reprogram the factory settings a little bit. Maybe not rewrite it, but
I think that's sentience.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's like when a mind gets to the point where it can self-reflect and self-modify. I mean, that's where we are. That's great. And if we're not doing that, we're sort of reducing ourselves to an animal.
Yeah.
Like a state of nature, like an animalistic state where we don't have the capacity to self-reflect. Like if you're not self-reflecting, you're not living up to being a human. Like you need to slow down and design your life for many reasons. One, just because, the atoms in your body are unimaginably lucky. Out of all the atoms in the universe, yours got arranged together in a way that can actually self-reflect, and you're not doing it. Like that's the ultimate universal irony. No, like, do that. You're a human. Do it. Like, design your life. Don't just live your life. Like, decide what you want your life to be, and make it that way, because you're the only goddamn thing in the universe that can actually do that. So do it. It's kind of pathetic if you don't. Well, yeah, that's kind of a weird look on things, but yeah, I think I think it's accurate.
Yeah, it may be an odd take, but it doesn't make it any less true, in my personal opinion. I don't know. I was in a period of I was in a down not too long ago. I won't say like a depression necessarily, but I was just I was very undermotivated. I was not happy with the way things were going in my life. I wasn't, putting effort into things that felt like they weren't going anywhere. And, at some point At first it was always like, oh, well, if I had only done this, or if this thing had done that, or if this was different, then, but at some point, I was lying in my bed, wallowing in my sorrows. And I just said, like, you have to go to the gym. Like, you have to go to the gym. That's the first thing that we're going to do today. Accomplish that. Get that done. Okay, you're not happy with this. Why is that not happening? Fix it instead of wallowing about it. And I think that comes back to the whole perspective that we've been talking about this entire time, is that it's so easy to get focused. I mean, I was in this for weeks, almost like 4 or 5 weeks of just days would just slog on. It was not fun. It was not a fun time. And that was a very severe lack of mindfulness from me. Severe lack. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why, and I won't get into that. But, in hindsight, if I had come at it with the tools that I now understand even better than I did then, it wouldn't have affected me nearly to the extent that it did. And I would have been a more productive person, and I wouldn't have gained 10 pounds by sitting around for a month. And, it's, I don't know. These are just things, and we may be getting out of activism, but live your best life. Okay. Take care of yourself.
That is activism.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself. Live your best life. Be healthy. Be mentally healthy. Talk about your problems. Face your problems. That's just some advice that I can give to everybody. From the youngin over here. A little bit of life advice.
No, that's good stuff. Like you can't just talk about like don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. Like you have to teach people how to live and how to be better people all along the way. It's like a holistic approach, right? We have to better ourselves for sure along the way.
Yep. It's like the whole, people say this for like a relationship, you can't, give your all to a relationship if you're still working on yourself. I think that's, everybody's working on themselves. If you're not, like we said earlier, if you're not working on yourself, you can be improving and you're not, and you need to figure out why. But there is a certain truth to that, to where if you haven't even started and you're living your life exactly the same way you were when you were 15 and you haven't fixed any of your problems or grown up at all, everybody's got some growing up to do, in my personal opinion. That's more personal philosophy than it is any necessarily hard, rigid guideline everybody should live their lives by. But that's just what I've seen, how I live my life. Always try to be better than you were yesterday, in some way. Always try to be a little bit better.
And since we're on like hippie cerebral stuff, like my favorite way to look at my life and to tell people to look at their life, again, credit where it's due, 10-year-old Molyneux. Your life is like a comet, like a meteor. And you're born and you hit the atmosphere and, a fiery explosion happens. And you burn through the atmosphere and then you blink out of existence. And the choice that you have is how fucking brightly you burn for that brief moment that you exist. And so you can ride your life out and you can, just kind of go with the flow and just kind of exist and deal with whatever comes. And you'll kind of, burn your way through and you'll fizzle out. Or you can fucking set that son of a bitch off like a nuke. You can light up the ground underneath you for hundreds of miles on your way down in a way that no one ever forgets and everyone is changed by. Like, the choice is yours. You're going to exist for a brief amount of time. How brightly are you going to burn? That's how I try and think about life.
Yeah, Quirt here says you can't give to others fully if you're not taking care of yourself too. I think that's, a lot of people try to gain a sort of fulfillment directly from others, and I think maybe that's a part of the culture. I know some people like myself, I'm very much an extrovert. I like communicating. I get energy off of being around and talking to other people. Like, I could do this all day. I love having conversations and talking with people, but
Me too.
At the
I
same
go through
time,
life looking for conversations.
yeah, exactly. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that I can just throw all of my me out of the way. You need some me time. And again, this is more personal than it is any sort of rigid philosophy that is based off of all of these different readers and everything. But I've found success in living this, and I'd like to share it, is basically all that I'm saying. Especially recently. found a lot of success. Take some you time, dang it. Sometimes you just need a day where you just sit back and read a book. And sometimes you need a day where you have to tell yourself to stop being so freaking lazy and get something done with your life, you know? You just have to have that mindfulness. I've said that word a dozen times at least at this point. Mindfulness. Change people's lives.
And, you know, certain people maybe just don't want to burn brightly. They just want to enjoy their life peaceably and quietly.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's fine. Just make sure that I guess the only thing I'm saying is just make sure that you're making that decision. Don't let life make the decision for you. Just decide. Like, if you just want to be comfortable and quiet, that's your life, man. You do you. Just make sure you're picking that. Not just letting it happen to you is what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
No, that's 100% fair. That's 100% fair.
We're getting all zen here.
No, I mean, you know what? It's not something I've really talked about, but it's something that has been important. It's important to me. It's something I care about. You know, mental health issues. I was going to bring this up. I think I had a conversation, and it was a very long conversation about like the non-aggression principle and free will and stuff like that. And we came down to this argument where we kind of hit an agreement, sort of. And it was I don't remember which shooter it is off the top of my head. There was a mass shooter. I don't think it was the movie theater. He was killed, whoever this shooter was. But he had a tumor in his head. Whenever they did the autopsy on him, he had a tumor in his head. And there was a point to where everybody they interviewed with his family and everything was like, oh yeah, like 4 months ago, he just started acting really weird. We thought it was a phase, you know, he'd get through it. Next thing you know, he shoots a place up. How much, you know, this is obviously, we can make as many guesses as we want, but how much of that tumor had a role in his action? And if we could give him the anti-tumor pill and it's gone, how responsible is he for something he had no control over? If we've already made the assertion that this tumor was the kill people tumor, and it told him to kill people, he was unable to fight this compulsion. So, and I, you know, personally, I don't know if this is because I'm a wimp or whatever you want to call it, or I just don't like the idea, but I have a very difficult time saying that person, there has to be restitution for what was done. There has to be. That's just the way the world works. But to say that, like, he's directly responsible, I don't know. What do you think about situations like that? I'm sure you've had this thought experiment either brought to you or you've thought about it before. It's a very difficult one, in my personal opinion. I think if you have a hardline answer either way, you've either spent way more time thinking about it than I have, or you know something I don't. So,
I mean, I think this is almost the same discussion as the one we had on free will. So, like, what's the difference between terrible genetics, a terrible upbringing that they weren't responsible for, that caused them to be a broken, violent person, and a tumor that caused them to be a broken, violent person? So, like, these are factors out of their control. It's also part of, like, let's come full circle back to liberty. So, you know, when we talk about, like, humans will always be flawed. There will always be a certain percentage of humans that are bad people, or that do bad things, or that are violent. That's why we can't have involuntary centralized authority structures, because that is where these people will go and abuse others with those power structures. And so if we understand that, like, it's part of the universe. And, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with my daughter's situation, but this is the lesson that I learned from that. So, like, she was diagnosed with leukemia about 1.5 years ago. And so I did a video on my channel. You can find it. It's very interesting when you're a YouTuber, when you're a YouTuber and you do philosophy, because, like, as you journey through life and things happen to you and you have revelations, you make content about it to share it with other people. And so you can actually go back in time on my YouTube channel and find the video where this revelation hit me, and, like, this realization, my life kind of changed. And this is kind of where 1.5 years later, you know, I'm finding myself in this more, like, stoic Zen place where I'm accepting reality for what it is. This started 1.5 years ago, and you can watch that moment happen on my channel. You have to realize that, like, reality is reality. This is part of life. People with tumors are part of existence. Little girls with cancer are part of existence. People with broken upbringings and abusive parents that generate violent humans is part of existence. you have to not only accept that it's part of existence, but to live an intelligent life, you should expect those things to be part of existence and plan for them. And the way that we appropriately plan for bad, violent people to be in existence is to not allow structures of involuntary power to exist for them to abuse us with, or to fail to protect us from the violent, evil people with. Until we get to the point where we're like genetically engineering humans and raising people perfectly, which will never happen. It's utopian. This stuff is going to exist in reality. There will always be broken, damaged people. It's part of existence. Did that answer your question?
No, yeah, I think you're definitely getting on to the meat and potatoes of it. So there's and this is the same. I give this for every time I talk about the nap. I try to make a point of at least sometimes going over the nap every however many episodes. We'll talk about a specific part of it, or we'll go over like an overview again, or some scenarios that I've gotten as questions. I've done 2 of them now, and every time I get these just a giant batch of hypotheticals, and I always end the show by saying the same thing. And it's like, look, this is the way the world is. There are always going to be situations that you've never heard of before, you've never been trained for, you've never seen coming, and it's you have the tools available to you, and you just have to at some point accept the fact that you may not have the answer in front of you, but you have to assess the situation with the information that's been given to you. And I think you can approach many different facets of life like that, including this situation. While it may seem disconnected, it may seem like it's a bit of a leap to go from one to the other. It's the same concept. We're working from the fact that we are all people on this planet who are responsible for our bodies and what they do. It doesn't, does it suck that Home Slice has a tumor that makes him want to kill people? Yes, that sucks. I can empathize with that. I am sorry. It doesn't change the fact that if you try to shoot me and you have a tumor, I'm going to defend my life. I'm not going to say, he's got a tumor though. I mean, that doesn't change that. So,
well, what it should also change though is your expectations. Like, look, it's part of reality that there are people with brain tumors that might go shoot up random places in public. What should you do about that fact of reality? Well,
defend
you should
yourself.
probably carry a weapon with you just in case. Like, that's what you should do. Like, there are people out there with that are violent and manipulative. What should you do about that? Well, expect to encounter some of them and be ready to deal with it appropriately. So like, that's the lessons you learn. You don't go attack a bunch of peaceful people, Beto, and disarm them. That's the absolute opposite fucking thing you should do. If you know that there's going to be violent, broken people out there, is disarm all their victims, you fucking moron. Sorry, I really have been angry about this guy lately.
I cannot stand him.
The thing you do is expect that to happen again and to have people be able to prepare for it. That's what you do. It's obvious. It's obvious.
Yeah. Okay, so if you have time, I'd like to open up one more can of worms that kind of brings in everything that we've been talking about, and is one of my hot topic issues that I just love getting into. And that is, we're going to bring us all the way back to the beginning, talking about promoting libertarianism. And I think there's a lot of merit to this idea of minimizing police interaction inside of voluntarist communities and circles, right? So if you were to get into a car accident, you would, instead of calling the police immediately, you would try to resolve things amicably amongst, you as independent people. And before I go off and inevitably get in my tirade, now that we're talking about this, why don't you go ahead and tell me what you think about minimizing involvement with police? I'm pretty sure I know where you stand, but
the general rule is I don't call the cops unless somebody deserves to be murdered. but no, that is not a blanket statement. So like, I was in a car accident a while back, and this happened to me. This would be a perfect counterexample of when I should have called the cops and didn't. The guy ran a red light, T-boned me. And then because there was no police report on file, he later lied to his insurance company and ended up suing me for his damages. it was just like a blatant falsehood. If I had a cop there with a police report, they would have had documentation of what happened. Like there would have been a paper trail that I could have used to defend myself using this bullshit legal system that holds the bad guys, as good guys. So I can't make a blanket statement that you should never call the cops, because there's certainly circumstances in this broken ass system where you're going to need to play the game defensively.
That's
somehow.
a very controversial position, though, for some people. It's especially in voluntarist circles. That can be very. And I'm not saying I disagree with you. I don't want to give off that idea, but I'm sure you've gotten, even just for that perspective, a fair amount of pushback.
I mean, another example. I'll pick whatever side you're not on, just so that we have a good conversation, because I can argue both. But just to give you another example of when I did call the cops, I had a rental car, and I was in a grocery store parking lot, and I was parked. I was not in the car, and as I'm walking back to the car, a little old lady parks in the spot and hits the car. Like she, I guess misjudged her parking job, because little old lady, they can't drive as well, whatever. Hit the fuck out of the rental car. So I am now in a situation where I'm in possession of somebody else's property that I'm renting, and they're normies. They're certainly not anarcho-capitalists, and they have certain expectations on how I handle their property for them. So I had the cop come and do a report, just so that, CYA for the insurance company and CYA for me with the insurance company, with the rental company's property. Did I like doing that? Hell no. Like, if I call, there's always a chance, it seems these days, that I call the cops for the rental company and I get shot for some stupid reason. Like, I've open carried my pistol every day of my life since it became legal in Texas. And so there's always chances of random things happening. So yeah, I'll pick whatever side you want me to take, but that's there are circumstances. I will not make a blanket statement. It's a judgment call for you and your life.
Just a quick tangent real quick. You said you open carry?
Yeah.
Is that like an exercise of rights thing, or do you do so based off of like a defense? Like, do you believe it deters people? Just, I don't want to make a whole big thing out of this.
No. I get asked this all the time by everybody. I open carry as a method of activism to help normalize, the culture around guns. Like if people see a family guy with 2 kids and a wife going to a restaurant and the guy's open carry, he's not an evil, scary person. Look, he's there with his kids and his wife, and there's a gun. So thousands of impressions throughout my life of people seeing a normal, peaceful person openly carrying a weapon. If I'm ever in a situation in which I feel unsafe, I conceal carry immediately, because I think it's tactically the better option. But most of my life I'm not in scary or dangerous areas, so I open carry for activism.
I've been considering it now that I'm coming back to Texas, and the open carry's passed. But I don't know. I am a part of that demographic of most likely to shoot up a random building. So maybe that's not the best idea for me to do that. But
why? You have a tumor?
No, I'm a young Caucasian male,
white
and
guy.
it makes so.
Yeah.
I always think about whether I'm. I love the idea. I love the idea of the activism of just carrying it because I'm not going to hurt anybody. And it shows like, wow, I wasn't shot by that guy with a gun. But
yeah, and he was a nice guy.
Yeah, exactly.
You also have to elevate your behavior.
Yeah, 100%.
Because everybody takes literally everything you do 100 times more seriously than you intend it. It's like you can never really show anger at all. Otherwise,
posturing.
suddenly you're a crazy person with a gun,
Yeah, once you have that gun on your hip, you're posturing. You have the power play right there. So, it can be, and that's another thing too. I don't want to come off to somebody as like a threat. And I'm just as capable of defending myself with it in a concealed carry holster as I am with it on my hip. So, but it's something, I was just curious.
Listen, like the whole point of the activism is because of that feeling that you're describing.
Yeah.
That discomfort at open carrying is the reason I open carry, to make people less uncomfortable with seeing people with guns. This used to be normal life in the West. Like in every Western, everybody's got a pistol on their hip. This is normal. This is not strange. This is just a person carrying the tools that they need of self-defense.
Well,
so that's the activism is the point.
It wasn't that long ago when gun racks in your truck were common. I mean, heck, my grandfather still has one, but he would talk about everybody, everybody kept their shotgun and their hunting rifle in the back of their truck ready to go whenever they needed it. Just reach over and But even now, if you were driving down the road and Mary Sue with her, her Green New Deal sticker on her car sees your gun rack, they're gonna freak out. I just know it.
Yep.
I know they're gonna freak out.
Well, I mean, I've gone 3 years and I've only had 2 incidents, and they were both very mild. I had and I think it was both times it was out of towners. So it was Christmas time, so I think we had some visitors from another state. I went to a restaurant. It was a steakhouse, and this lady left her family to walk up and get in my space to tell me I don't feel safe right now. Like, first of all,
me neither.
If you're really scared of the guy with a gun, you don't walk up into his face and like start telling him that you don't like what he's doing. Like, obviously you feel safe, otherwise you wouldn't do that, you idiot. But no, like that was the worst that's ever happened. The only other time, it was something along those lines, like somebody that was probably from out of town, but literally like over 3 years of my life now, I think. Every day of my life, I have no issues whatsoever.
Well, that's reassuring. That's cool. I'm glad to hear that. But yeah, so to get back to where we were going, and maybe, this is kind of, they're related. Firearm ownership and interactions with police have always been very, it's a touchy subject to be sure, because it immediately puts law enforcement on edge. But I usually take the position of the moment you call law enforcement for anything, you have escalated the situation to the fullest extreme. You have brought this strong arm of the law. So even if it is, CYA, and I can totally understand the rationale of, this lady hit my rental car. I need this covered because I'm not about to be screwed for the damages to this rental car. I wish there was another option, because I hate the idea.
In that situation, I was doing it like on behalf of rental company. Like the rental company would want me to have the police called for their property,
and,
right?
And you as a representative of their wishes by the contract, and stuff like that for renting. That you could make a contract law case there, I guess. Yeah, that's fair. Because I'm sure there's something on there about if the vehicle's damaged, this is the procedure. So, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind, because I've seen police be called over little things, like, oh, kids are playing in the street, better call the cops. I'm like, what are you doing? Yeah. Like, you've literally gone to the max. Like, nah, don't go talk to their parents. Don't be like, hey, like, this is maybe unsafe. There's cars coming through here. Like, let's just, try to keep them out of the streets. And then you just go straight to like, all right, let's go get the guys with the guns who can throw them in jail. That just seems, it's inappropriate in my personal belief, and it's an abuse of power. And
it's wanton. It's dangerous. It's reckless. It's excessive. Yeah, all these adjectives for sure. Yeah.
So that's usually, I won't say never call the police, especially nowadays when we don't have like a private option that it can be held accountable. If we did, I would say never call the government police again. But
well, you also have a legal system that is perverted by the influence of a centralized authority, like a monopolized justice system. So, for example, with the wreck that we had in the street, I didn't call the cops like I should have, and so I didn't get the magical documents bearing the magical Blue Line Gang cartel's logo on it that would have kept me from getting sued by the guy that hit me. This monopolized justice system is not something I consent to. Obviously, it's kind of a defensive act. If I had it to do over, I would call the Blue Line cartel. So maybe I really hate calling them. It's not like I triple think it every time I do it. Yeah, like we had a neighbor. Like cops showed up to a neighbor because somebody called them about something, and I had to go over afterwards, because after the cops show up at your door and that one of your neighbors called them and sent them to your house, I like made a point to go over and be like, look, I did not fucking call the cops. Like, that was not me. I would never do that to you. Just because like now suddenly they're suspicious of all their neighbors, and now there's less friendliness in the neighborhood because somebody's calling the cops on people around here. I avoid it at all costs. At almost all costs.
I think its accessibility is a hindrance to the idea of voluntary interactions between people. I think I think that's a fair way of putting my position. Its accessibility makes it too easy to jump the gun and to get your way in otherwise voluntary interactions with people. Because the second you put the law and you threaten people with death or jail, you have escalated the situation, and most of the time there's no longer a fair statement of compliance anywhere in there, because they are under threat, they are being coerced, and it's not ethical. It's really not. It's a power play.
Yes,
basically.
But just to debate you on it, the nuanced counterpoint is that you don't have a voluntary dispute resolution process to help you or to back you up in these situations, and so it's forcibly monopolized against your consent. So sometimes you have to act defensively using the only system you're allowed by force to use.
Yeah, I would concede in this exact day and age, we're not going to play the theory and Capistan game that, whatever. We'll get there when we get there. But today it is monopolized. I still would encourage the most extreme discretion. Like, if you can come to an amicable...
I'm not arguing with you on that. Yeah.
If you can come to an amicable resolution without involving the police, there's no reason to get the police involved. If that guy hits you and was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, here's $6,000 or however much you assess the damages to be, boom, cool, whatever. That could be done, in my opinion, right there. Some people may, no, you just got to go to jail for this or whatever. Like, whatever, however you want to address the situation. But as long as if you can do so, hell, that's pretty freaking anarchist voluntarist in my personal opinion. So it's a lot better than, like I said,
yeah, it can go really well too. Like another guy, hit me. This was before I was an anarchist even. And he asked me not to call the cops and promised to pay. And, being maybe naive or not that I was, I trusted him, and I went and got an estimate for the damages, and I gave him the estimate, and he gave me the cash. No government involved, no insurance companies involved. It was a cash transaction, all done, So I got my car fixed. It was great. Can you trust people to do that? Hell no. But It turned out well in that situation. So,
yep, it's true. And even then, like you said, it's monopolized. So it's not like you could draft up contracts or something, because they'd have to be legally binding to the current justice system. And they'd be like, well, why didn't you get involved with us to begin with? And so there's no blah, blah, blah. It would just be a total mess.
And then you say, well, I don't like you guys. I think you're evil. And then they don't really help you anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Usually doesn't go too well.
Yep.
And I guess same thing, the whole monopolized justice system enforcement, etc. Let's talk just briefly about there's not really very many of them, but I've come into contact in Texas with some people who hunt and fish without licenses, and they do so because they're protesting the idea of a hunting and fishing license. What do you think about that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Why not?
Okay. I didn't know if there is a position that some people have taken that says that, like, of all of the things to be like trying to get in trouble for and trying to get fined over and have the government put violence on you. I'm not saying I agree with this, but you never know. Some people have interesting perspectives.
That's somebody's hill to die on. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's exactly. Okay. Yeah, that's the way I see it, is that, they're I just felt like I would ask because I've run into it before. So
yeah.
I don't have an issue with it. You're not going to see me coming out there asking, "Hey, you got a license?"
You're an agorist fisherman. Go for it. Yeah,
exactly. That kind of comes back to agorism. It actually comes directly back to agorism. So that's fair.
Yep. The land is quote unquote public, which is public property is an invalid form of property. So it's closest thing you can get to unowned land. You want to go yank some fish out of the water? Go for it. Whatever. There's no ethical case to be made against that.
You brought up the idea of unowned land, and again, this is something that we could go super far into, and I know it's a tangent, but this is something I've been thinking about for a while as well. There has been a proposal, and I think if we were to have Ancapistan tomorrow, snap our fingers, I think the redistribution or distribution of land would be the most contentious part of the whole thing, because it's like, who gets all of this federal owned land that makes up like 70% of the, or 60% of the US? And there's this idea of like, oh, it would be unowned land and you'd go out and claim it. And I don't know. Have you ever thought about this idea before? Because to me, it seems to be one of the biggest hurdles for moving towards a total voluntary privatized society.
Like you can't philosophize midstream on it. So you have to set up the entire state of the universe really to decide how you would hope that would work.
Exactly.
So like,
I mean, that's
if
the
you
issue
can,
that I find.
if you change enough hearts and minds, like we said, you ignore the government out of existence. The government just stops exerting control over the unowned land. People can go homestead it as normal. It's only like in situations where there's some kind of abrupt, or revolutionary type transition that it really becomes, I think, more contentious.
Mm-hmm.
Like if the government's ignored out of existence, the way it works is like, people start paying their taxes. I said paying taxes. I never said that.
Oh no!
No, if people stopped being taxed, no one pays their taxes. Taxes are extorted and taken by force. So if people just start ignoring that more and more, then the people that work for the government have less resources to go and patrol and enforce their ownership, quote unquote, ownership over national parks and such. And so, as part of the process of ignoring the government out of existence, maybe somebody goes and decides to live on a national park, and they probably get ignored by the people in government because they're being ignored out of existence and have better things to worry about. That's probably closer to how it would go in that scenario. But like in an abrupt scenario, like where,
Exactly. How do you theory craft something like that?
Like if Kokesh wins the presidency and dissolves the government,
yeah.
he's got a whole plan for auctioning off blah blah blah. I don't think any of that's plausible.
I don't see it going well. Is basically, I had that question posed to me before, and then I didn't have, so I was just fishing, maybe seeing if you had some brilliant answer that I didn't. But that's basic. I pretty much said the same thing, honestly. Is that hell if I know. If that situation ever comes to be, we've got a host of other problems to go with it. So I don't know if land redistribution will be distribution will be the first thing on my mind in that situation. But sure, it's a fair idea to think about. Something for you boogaloo types to think about. What are you going to do with all that land?
Yep.
Well, I think we've had a great conversation. It's been almost about 2 hours and 15 minutes now. Pretty good. The AC in my room is not working. If you can't tell, I'm sweating bullets. It's like 81 degrees in here, and yeah, I got to go figure out what's up with this. But this has been a fantastic conversation. The chat, thank you guys all for being here. Patrick, everybody can find you over at Disenthrall for YouTube and Facebook on Not Governor Patrick Smith. And is there anything else important that I'm missing?
You can find all my stuff on, if you go to the website, disenthrall.me/platforms. You can find all the places that we post our content. We also have the notgovernor.com page if you want to go check out the Declaration of Individual Independence, which I think is a really powerful document for the people that, especially for like the people that believe in the founding fathers, and they have a lot of like emotional respect for the ideas of the founding fathers. It's a really powerful document. Good for sharing, I think. Yeah. And so I basically do as much content as I possibly can, given life situations. If you ever have something you want me to discuss or talk about, send it my way, or join our Discord server. We have a bunch of great volunteers there that debate like every day of the year and have some amazing conversations. So there's a link to our Discord on that disenthrall.me/platforms page as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've been looking at getting you on the show for a while now, and I finally was like, all right, we're going to contact this guy. We're going to get him on here because I like the way he thinks, and I feel like we'd have a good talk. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, because it was a blast.
Oh, I had a great time. If
Yeah.
you'd let me, I'd probably post a copy of this on our YouTube channel.
Yeah,
People
sure.
can
I'll
get
definitely
exposed to your show as well.
Yeah, I'll definitely shoot it your way, and we can do that. That sounds good. I just have to. I'll edit off the little countdown timer I put in the beginning for my live streams, and I'll shoot a copy of it over towards you. So,
all right. Well, for the people on my channel watching this, why don't you give a shout to your stuff?
Oh, sorry. You cut out there for just a second. What was that?
I was saying for the people that are going to later be watching this on my channel, on my platform, why don't you give a shout out of where they and your.
Okay, yeah. So, name's Christian. I host Liberty After Dark, which is this live stream and a podcast. The podcast is available all over YouTube, Facebook, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Podbean, Castbox, wherever you want to find it, you can find this podcast. It's free, available to everybody. Usually takes just under a week for the episodes to get rolled out in the podcast format. So if you're listening to this on YouTube, maybe 4 to 5 days, it'll be available as a podcast. I also have an email at contact@libertyafterdark.net that gets tons of emails. So go ahead, feel free, add to it. I read every single one of them. I reply to most, unless it's very mean, and then I won't reply to you. So that's pretty much all I've got for me.
All right. Well, I had a good time. Thanks for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. You have a nice rest of your night.
Yeah, you too.
Bye. All right. That was the wonderful Patrick Smith. Absolutely fantastic human being. Cool guy. Great stuff. I enjoyed it. Oh my God. My little thermostat over there, it said 81 a second ago. It's at 82 now. It is 82 freaking degrees in this room. Oh, I'm dying. It's hot in here. So, whoo, man. I got to figure out how I'm supposed to get a 2.5 hour long video over to Patrick. No. But we'll see. Well, we'll make it work. Anybody have anything before I wrap up the show, since I just gave an outro? I'll give you like 10 seconds to type something, and then I'm leaving, because God, it's hot. I got to open up a window. It's cooler outside than it is here. You can do it. Thank you. Can you guys not see this? Seriously? Look at how shiny my face is. Look at, oh, it's so shiny. We love you. Well, I love you guys too. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your night. This is it for Liberty After Dark. Take it easy. Take a shower, you nasty. I will. Bye.